PC today, and I'm going to start with the bare bones of the PC, which is the case. Now it's very compact inside, and you can see that we have an AGP slot. This is for graphics. We have a PCI slot here for expansion. You can put extra cards, a wireless card, extra USB ports, etc. We have two blue slots here for memory, for RAM. And finally we have the white slot here, which is for the processor. So that's the actual brains of the computer. So now we've seen the inside of the machine, we now need to look at the components. We've got things such as the cooling fan, which draws the heat away and exchanges it for cooler air. We have the heatsink, which draws heat from the processor, towards the cooling fan. We have the hard drive, where your primary storage is kept. This one in this particular case is 40 gig. We have the AGP graphics card, and you can determine that by the long slot here. If we compare that to a wireless card, you can see that the contacts are neater, and that's purely connected to a wireless network. We have the memory, or RAM, in this case 512 DDR. And finally, we have the processor. Now the processor has to be covered in heatsink paste to draw the heat from the processor to the heatsink and fan. The important part now is to cover the actual processor, the actual part that gets warm, with heatsink paste. This allows the heat to be drawn directly into the cooling fan. So what we do is we have some paste on the screwdriver, and we gently just put a covering onto the metal part, making sure that it's completely covered. If the processor is not covered, then within about 30 seconds it can actually overheat and it wrecks the processor. So the first part we install is the processor, which goes into this white part here. And on the processor, what we need to do is turn it over and look, and you'll see a small arrow, and that there faces the direction in which it needs to be fitted. So going into the computer, we ensure that this socket, there's a lever which locks the socket in place. We make sure the lever is lifted up, turn it over, make sure that we're locating it properly, gently lower it into the white socket, allow it to engage, and then fasten the locking clip securely. Next item to do is the memory. Now the memory has a notch on it which allows it only to go in one way. So the first things we do, folks, is unclip the two memory retaining clips, ensure that we have it in the correct way, gently lower it into the PC, moving any cables aside if you need to. Once it's located, press down firmly on the top and the RAM will click into place. Like so. The next stage is to insert the heatsink and fins into the shuttle, and once again this draws the heat from the processor along these tubes here to little fins which allow a fan to radiate the heat, like the way a radiator works. So what we do, folks, we lower that in and we locate it onto the 4 threads. And once happy, we then gently secure with a screwdriver. Often a good practice to do it diagonally so that you end up with all screws engaged. Remember to tighten the remaining 2. There, it's fitted. Next part is the actual cooling fan itself. This is quite easy to fit, it simply slips over the heatsink, moving cables out of the way. And is secured and fastened at the rear with 4 screws which are tightened by hand. Next item is the graphics graphics card. This is very important because it takes the signal from the computer and produces an output. On this particular card we've got the standard VGA and the DVI, digital video out, and also a TV out to connect to your home television. This particular card has a secondary locking device at the end, and this is evident on the main board. It's a white clip. So we make sure the clip is facing down. We lower the card into place after we move the cables out of the way. Okay, we locate into the slot and we press down firmly until that white clip locks into place. Next card will be the wireless card. Very similar, without the extra locking at the rear. So I'm going to feed this antenna through the shuttle casing and then locate into the white PCI slot. Okay, so once located, once again, press down firmly, locks into place, and finally we need to secure with 2 screws. Right, before we connect the hard drive, we need to check out where the actual connections are. Now on this motherboard, we have a blue IDE connector on the main board and also a white. The blue is the primary connection and the white is the secondary. And using a ribbon cable, like this one here, we can connect with this cable 1 device to each channel, but with a dual cable, another 4 devices can be connected to this shuttle. The first thing we need to do is locate this cable onto the motherboard. Now there is, once again, a ridged connector which only allows this ribbon cable to be fitted one way. So basically we ensure that we've got the locator in the right place. We locate it gently onto the motherboard. It's quite a tricky job. Okay, and once located, we press down firmly to engage the cable. The final job is to refit the cover. Quite a fiddly job once again. We slide it over, and the actual trick is to engage the slots to the sides. Once you're happy that it's all engaged, we then slide it forward. Okay, make sure it fits the front correctly. Okay, and when you're happy with that, we then refit the screws to retain the case. And there we have one completed shuttle.